You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We should be the least fear-filled people on the face of the planet because God has told us, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I am with you. I am for you.
Yeah.
So if we really believe these things and we believe that God has called us to this mission, then what are we afraid of?
That's right.
Let's just jump.
Yeah.
Say, all right, God, I'm in. Let's go.
Right.
Let's get a big vision for what it is that God has called you to.
And let's accomplish it.
Welcome back to another episode here at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. My name is Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
And we've got another great episode lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about 4 practical tips for mapping out your organization's vision.
I like that. Sounds good.
And we love vision, right?
We do. Yeah, without vision, the people perish.
Yeah. So this is going to be a little bit of a learning cap. Put on your learning cap. You know, sometimes we have some great stories. Sometimes we have guests on. But today we're going to be diving into some practical tips.
I love it.
If you wouldn't mind subscribing to this podcast, we release weekly content for nonprofit leaders. So if you work in ministry, if you work for a Christian school or private school or camps or a homeless shelter or pregnancy centers or Young Life or CEF or FCA or any of those organizations. Or crew. This podcast is for you. Basically, if you're involved in running a nonprofit, just in general, we exist to help you come up with a vision and then helping you figure out how to get that vision funded. That's what we mean by fully funded. So it's not, we're going to help you, pay the bills or get the next month's rent in. It's we're thinking bigger, long-term picture, right? What are you trying to do in the next 5 years?
So you're not just going to a board meeting every month saying, how are we going to make payroll next week? And you're not having to sweat the minor expenses that you might have.
Right. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you would probably think the way that you map out a vision is by having a vision dinner, right, Jason?
Right.
Well, we're going to go into a little bit more detail. We're actually going to start with 4 things, 4 practical tips. So here they are. And we're going to dive into each one of these in more detail. So number 1, we believe that you should start with prayer.
Everything.
Number 2,
so important.
We believe you should be specific. Number 3, you need to dream big. And number 4, you need to write it down and execute it.
Amen.
So let's start with prayer. Everything we do, we want to start with prayer. Now, now, why is that, Jim?
Well, prayer is the foundation for everything. God is the one who has given us our vision. He's given our mission, our vision, our values. We've got to go to him and seek his advice, his counsel on direction. When we get out ahead of God, that's when mistakes start to happen. If we aren't in line with his plans, his goals, his direction for us, we'll get off target. And it's, if you can imagine a rocket being sent off into space facing the moon so that it lands on the moon and then starts to get off target little by little by little, after a while, you are so far away from the planet. It's exactly the same with God's vision and God's plan. If we aren't in sync with God's plan and what he intends for our organization, this is not our organization. We are stewards of this organization. It's God's organization. And we are simply stewards, and we need to go to him to say, it's your organization. You need to fund it. And you need to give us the direction, and you need to give us the vision. And he will do that when you go to him. But if you try and do it in your own power, it's going to fail.
I have many stories in my own life where the Lord has given me a vision for something. Usually comes through a burden that God gives you through meeting with people or talking with your pastor or whatever. But in this case, I've started many organizations. So I've started some businesses and I've started some nonprofits. And it usually starts with a burden. And I usually do start by praying about that. And then what happens is, you get the thing started and there's momentum. And at least for me, I usually say, well, I got it from here, I can take it from here, Lord, and I don't like audibly
intentionally
say
that. Yeah.
But that's kind of like my attitude kind of just becomes less dependent on him. I'm not praying about things as much as I used to. And I just kind of get into the daily grind. And basically the attitude is, well, why? I don't need to pray about this. I got this. I know what needs to be done.
God's leading me.
Yeah.
I know that.
Right.
And we get so focused.
Yeah.
We put God in the back
so
seat.
it's a slow kind of veering, like what you were describing,
or whatever.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, that's happened to me multiple times in my life, like multiple times. And God usually slaps me on the side of the head with some major crisis, that kind of brings me back to like, oh my goodness, I need to pray about this.
Yeah. Right.
We've drifted here,
Exactly.
And so I think it's really important that you start with prayer.
Absolutely.
Especially if you feel like things are getting kind of stagnant in your organization. You feel like, you're just going to work and you don't know why you're there. And you just feel like, oh man, I just got email after email and I just don't really want to be here. And you're just starting to lose the energy and the excitement of being in ministry and working for the King of Kings.
Right.
You need to go back to prayer. You need to go back to, why am I doing this? What is God calling me here for?
Right.
Why has God put me here? Why am I on this earth right now at this particular time? What is God calling me to do at this organization? And everyone can play a part. It doesn't matter if you're the executive director or whether you're the janitor.
Right.
Everyone is working for your organization and can play a part in, glorifying God and bringing him, helping to move the ministry forward.
Right. Absolutely.
So, some key verses here that are my personal favorites is Matthew 6:33, which is seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. So that's a scripture that I keep going back to is, am I putting God first in everything?
Yeah.
If I'm not, then chances are I'm probably needing to go back to prayer.
Well, I would say for me, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That is such an important verse that we've got to put the Lord first in everything. And when he starts to fade to second or third in our life, all things start to come apart.
There's a guy we were working with a couple of years ago who we helped start their radio drama ministry, and he's the executive director, but he also does writing.
Right.
And one of the things that he does on an annual basis, just to kind of reconnect with why he's doing what he's doing, is he goes to a special cabin and he just kind of locks himself in a room for like a week, and he spends that time, praying, seeking the Lord and getting some fresh ideas and writing and just whatever. He just really tries to connect with what is God putting on my heart to write about.
Right.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So tip number 1, if you're feeling like you need to have some fresh vision in your organization, find a quiet spot, get alone with the Lord, maybe even, fast for a day or so and, get serious, get on your knees and just say, Lord, what do you have for me here? What do you want from me?
Yeah. Go to the one who creates the vision.
Yeah. And just open up the word, spend some time really digging in and don't just do it as like a 10-minute ritual, but really get serious about trying to hear and
don't just speak. Do a lot of listening and be there. Because we can sometimes get into our prayer habit and it's just me saying, God, give me this, give me this, give me this, give me this.
Right.
When we just need to shut down and start to listen to him.
One of the best things that someone told me once was, get alone with the Lord and, get the word open or whatever and open up the word and meditate on it and do all the normal stuff, but then open up your journal and just sit and be quiet.
Right.
And let the Lord speak to you.
Exactly.
Just write down what he's telling you and meditate on it and, and then listen to some more. And And certainly we could all do more of that. I'm not perfect at it, and I know you're not for sure.
So. No, for sure not. You know me well enough. Yeah.
So that's tip number one.
Yep.
And Jim, what would be the second tip?
Well, the second tip, and it really is an important tip. I mean, I wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't an important tip. But that, in my mind, that second tip can be extremely important. And, a lot of times, people, they get off the mark and they even forget what their tips are sometimes. But from my standpoint, that second tip is be specific. It just frustrates me when I talk to people who are in development and fundraising, and every one of their needs is so broad and so general. We need to keep our doors open. We need to survive another day. We need to try and pay rents in February. It's just so important to be specific and make sure, in addition to specific, the partner, the hand to glove with specific, is be measurable as well too.
So we work with an organization that works with children. You work with an organization that works with youth.
Yeah.
And the founders had huge, massive goals, like reaching every child in every nation every day with the gospel.
But
right?
even they had to break it up into specifics.
Yeah. And my point is, it's okay to have a big vision like that. Maybe you want to start a Christian school in, the whole Chicagoland area, and you have a vision to start 50 schools. That's okay. But what we're saying is, when it comes down to having a vision mapped out for the next 3 to 5 years, you've got to get specific.
Right.
So in the next 3 to 5 years,
if you want to get it funded.
Yeah, and it needs to look like, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start 2 schools in this specific region of the Chicagoland area, with a goal of having 50 kids per school enrolled in the next year or two. And giving yourself a goal.
Bite-sized chunks. Yeah.
Right. So being able to break that down, and when you're presenting your vision to major partners or at a vision dinner, you've got it like really specific.
Right.
Like we want to plant 100 schools in the Chicagoland area, but we're gonna, in the next 2 or 3 years, we're gonna plant 2. Yeah. We're gonna
one
start
in
with
Elgin,
3.
One in West Chicago.
Right.
Whatever.
And it's going to cost this much.
Right.
And we need your help.
Right.
Yeah. And we're going to do it by next year at this time.
Yeah. And it costs $25,000 to open up a campus.
So being specific is really important. So it's important that you use numbers. It's important that you use dates. Yeah. It's important that you have specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, time-sensitive goals. We call those SMART goals.
And phrase that I like is that some is not a number and soon is not a time. And I think that really resonates, because it just shows that something that's vague doesn't work.
Yeah. So, Jim, let's talk about the third tip for mapping out your nonprofit's vision.
The third tip is to dream big. And I can't tell you how often I see organizations who are thinking small, thinking in the box. If you don't have a board member, you don't have an executive director, you don't have a leader who is thinking big. I worked for the consummate big dreamer, who was Bill Bright. No one that I ever knew dreamed bigger or had a bigger vision for the future. And it's so important because those big dreams are going to excite the staff, and they're going to excite our donors. And it's so important that we are looking into the future and thinking about those specific programs, projects that resonate with people. Unfortunately, the scarcity mentality will get us thinking small. It'll get us thinking little. It'll get us thinking on the cheap. When we think with the abundance mindset, the abundance mentality, that's going to get us thinking big.
Yeah. And just some practical little tips here. Challenge yourself and your team to think beyond what you believe is obtainable.
Yes.
Someone once said, if the size of your vision is not intimidating to you, then it's probably an offense to God.
Ooh, wow. I love that. That is great.
Because that means you're not trusting him, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We, in Crew, we create these things called BHAGs, and I'm sure other organizations, because we got it from a book, but it's a big, hairy, audacious goal.
So it's important that you know your calling, know why God has called you to this.
Yep.
And then, if God is with you, who is against you?
Right.
I mean, like, we should be the least fear-filled people on the face of the planet, because God has told us, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I am with you. I am for you.
Yeah.
So if we really believe these things, and we believe that God has called us to this mission, then what are we afraid of?
That's right.
Let's just jump,
Yeah.
Say, all right, God, I'm in, let's go.
Right.
Why else are you here on this earth? Let's get a big vision for what it is that God has called you to, and let's go
accomplish
it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I love it.
So after you've prayed about it, you've dreamed big, you've gotten specific.
Yep.
Then the fourth thing we would recommend is that you write it down.
Absolutely.
Jim, did you know this?
Yeah.
People who write down their goals are 42% more likely to accomplish their goal just because they wrote it down.
Yeah, I did know that. It's always fascinating. Yeah, that's one of the things my wife and I, we head out to Starbucks or some coffee place a few days after the new year and start to write our goals for the year and write them down when they're right there in front of you. It makes a big difference.
One thing that really helps me, because I'm kind of an audible learner. I'm not really a writer. I
kind of an auditory.
Yeah. One thing that I like to do is I like to record voice messages.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
I just go like walking around the neighborhood. My neighbors probably think I'm crazy, but I just go outside and I just start spewing out all these ideas.
Yeah.
And back in the day, if I wanted to like try to make sense of some of that, I'd have to listen to it. But the cool thing about AI and all the technology that exists now is I can like get my recording transcribed through a free transcription service, and I can just feed that into ChatGPT and say, give me an outline of everything that I said, because I have no idea what I just said, but it was pretty. I thought it was pretty good.
Right.
And it would be like, here's what you said. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's almost like I knew what I was talking about.
Right. I love that. That is great.
So, some people like to write things down. Some people like to, speak it out.
Right.
But whatever you got to do to kind of get it off your chest and make it real.
It organizes it. If you've got a sequential brain, it's organizing it in your brain. It's such a great way to do that.
Yeah, so some practical tips for this. Some of my boys are really into movies and filmmaking, and one of the things that they always do when they're making a film is they create a log line. Mm-hmm. And a log line is essentially one sentence, not two or three or four, or a paragraph, but like one sentence that basically says the entire plot of the whole movie.
Wow.
Got
one for you. The Matrix. A computer hacker discovers the truth about his reality and his role in a war against its controllers.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So I guess what we're trying to say here with the log lines is that it's important to have something written down about what you are trying to accomplish, right? You can't film a movie without having a log line. Like that's like the first thing that they ask you to say is like, what's the log line? What's your budget? It's just like, what's this thing about? So, when you're trying to map out a vision for your organization, try to create a log line. What are you trying to do in the next 5 years? I'm trying to start 3 pregnancy centers in the Chicagoland area to save 100,000 babies from getting an abortion. Just be specific and practical. Write it out in a clear, concise way and make it visible. Once you have it written down, and you have that vision made, then print it out, make a poster, put it on your wall, keep it in front of you because so often we forget.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Jim, this was a great episode and I hope that you found this helpful, and we will see you next time.
Take care.